today I'm joined by Chapin Rodriguez of Creaducate Consulting. Creaducate Consulting specialize in helping startups really nail their communication strategy. So Chapin, do you want to tell us a little more about who you are and what that involves?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the time. Our company, we're a small consultancy of researchers. So we all used to be, we did PhDs and postdocs in mostly biomedical fields, life sciences. And some of us are also have entrepreneurship experience ourselves. And our small team, we help researchers when they need to tell their scientific stories to different audiences. And that can be for getting a paper into a peer-reviewed journal, for getting an application accepted by a funding agency, for giving a powerful presentation at an important conference, or as in the case of Innovation Forum, for helping entrepreneurs pitch their business idea to, whether it's to patent lawyers, to investors, to potential strategic partners who might provide materials or know-how. So what we try to do is help people take their idea, which is usually very complex and deep, and put it on the table and be able to look at it from 360 degrees, consider all of its facets, and then decide, okay, for this particular audience, for this occasion, for our goals with this group, these are the facets we need to present, and this is the most effective way to do it. That's what we generally try to do.
That's it. And when you say communication strategy, what do you mean by that?
It's one of those great buzz phrases that can mean many things. I would say, I guess I would kind of roughly define communication strategy as actually, the word strategy is weird. It's actually the philosophy or approach where you're always thinking about your message, and you're always thinking about, and you're consciously creating the right message for certain groups using the right channels at the right time. And so a communication strategy is something I think that goes along with any startup, certainly, and any established company. And it's an everyday thing. And it's something that you're rethinking, that's evolving as the product evolves, as your market positioning evolves. You're always thinking about your messaging. So what is it that you're trying to tell people about why they should use your product or partner with you or whatever? And so in a way, it's similar to the brand of your company. You know, what is your presence out there on social media, on traditional advertising networks, in your conversations with partners, with investors? You know, what is that brand that you're projecting? You're trying to project a rapid product that's very accurate. Are you trying to project, we create this amazing experience for you through virtual reality, whatever? Are you creating a product that makes people feel better, that makes them healthier, that makes them feel more accomplished? What is it that you're giving to people? And so your communication strategy are the words and images that you put together to make people really feel, hey, our product can do this for you.
Yeah, I see. And just in terms of the healthcare aspects of these startups, is there sort of an additional pressure for this field to have a good communication strategy? What with the sort of annotations, etc.
Yeah, I think definitely for healthcare startups, there's the question of it's technical. Yeah, so when you're working with products and ideas that are grounded in science and technology and engineering, there is that level. So it's different from, let's say, I'm trying to create a new magazine, a lifestyle magazine. Yeah, pitching that to people to convince them to subscribe to me. It's a little bit different from pitching to them a new potential device or a new potential diagnostic kit, or absolutely. So there's that level of complexity that you don't have in other sectors. And then, of course, the trick becomes navigating what specifics and technicalities you mention in your communication strategy, because you've got to mention certain specifics. You've got to get nitty-gritty to some extent to stand out, to differentiate your product or idea from all the others in the marketplace. But you have to do it in a way that doesn't saturate the audience, that doesn't confuse them, lose them. Absolutely. And so one of the real challenges, I would say, I call it the challenge of triaging. Okay, so when you're trying to develop a communication strategy from pitching all the way through to becoming an established company, you want to think about triaging. And a lot of people don't know what that is. triaging originally, I think for usually people are familiar with it in the context of hospitals. So imagine two people walk into a hospital. One comes in kind of rubbing his shoulder and I have a slight ache here, you know, and this is the emergency room. Okay, so he walks in at midnight. So I have this slight ache here. Another person walks in around the same time and the eyeball is hanging by a little thread and blood's going everywhere. The triage staff is supposed to say, okay, you with the slightly sore shoulder, you sit down, we'll get to you at our first opportunity. You with the eyeball hanging out, you come with me right away. So triaging is for communication. I use that metaphor in the sense of you've always got 10,000 pieces of information you could tell your audience at a particular time. But you have got to triage out the 2 or 3 pieces of information that are really the most critical and meaningful ones right now for this audience, for these strategic goals. And that's what can be very hard for people who come from an engineering or science background, because you guys are very comfortable simultaneously handling all kinds of technical stuff in your head. But as you probably know, when you talk to your research supervisor or to other science or to some potential investor or to someone even at a conference who's not working with you day to day, they quickly can lose focus and can lose interest in what you're saying because they're not dealing with that all the time. So you've got to find a way in.
And I guess that's a key difference between communicating your idea in a more academic setting where it's details, compared to a more business setting where it's what is that key information that this particular stakeholder needs to know at this particular time.
You got it. Yeah. And then there's also important differences. You've hit the nail on the head where this is another key difficulty for a lot of people from a science or engineering background going into entrepreneurship is they forget that I would say 2 major things are different here. Priorities are different. So in academic research, the importance is discovery, novelty. It's really, you've got to be new if you want to get published, if you want to get funding, it's got to be new. Now, I should say more and more, even for research funding, there is an element of usefulness. There should be a deliverable at the end. The larger funding agencies especially, they want researchers, academic researchers even, to be doing things that will lead at some point down the road maybe to a product or intellectual property or something that is coming in. But once scientists go into the world of entrepreneurship, it's absolutely about usefulness. That is the alpha and omega, because that usefulness translates into profit, translates into uptake and sales. So I think scientists have to appreciate that's where things need to begin and end, is the usefulness. So you shouldn't go on and on in your communication strategy about, we're the first to put this thing in our system, we're the first to combine element A and B into our system. You need to mention that to differentiate yourself from the rest of the competition. But the alpha and the omega is, okay, what does that novel combination of A and B mean for what we can now do with diagnostics? So and then the second thing that was priorities. So the second difference between, say, entrepreneurship and just in academia is language. And, in the business world, so in the research world, most of the people you talk with are in the trenches of research. They deal with the jargon, with the molecules, with the processes almost every day. In business, those people, so the people you're talking with often are supported by those people in the trenches, but they themselves may not have so much of that direct experience. And that's something you've got to tailor.
Yeah, not easy to get right. So I see why it's so important for these startups to have a good communication strategy. Are there any sort of key pillars, key things that they can do to sort of get that going?
Yeah, I think key ideas with a communication strategy is I would recommend that it be explicit, that it be something that you and your team have carved out, preferably written, something that's portable that people can refer back to, because it's very easy to forget what the big goals are. Yeah. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think it's very important to remember that strategy, that explicit, even written strategy, is evolving. It's a work in progress, shall we say? It's something that's going to change depending on what you learn about your own product as you progress to market, and even after you've hit the market, what you learn about your customers, who's interested in it, actually. It should evolve as you go through your rounds of financing. It should evolve as the market evolves, right? So there's a lot of things that were healthcare priorities 5 or 10 years ago. It's not the same. The priorities are not necessarily the same now. And so it's got to evolve. It can't be something set in stone. And I think that strategy should start with a core. What is your core? You know, I think this is your bottom line value proposition. In a way, your 2 or 3 minute pitch. This is what is the essence of you, because that's what's supposedly going to revolutionize the market. It's going to make a big leap from the state of the art right now. And it's also what sets you apart from your competition, from the other companies that are also trying to make a leap from the state of the art. And that core, in my experience, most of the times, even as your communication strategy evolves, that core remains roughly the same. So for instance, you're pitching a device that uses a unique quartz filter to recycle sink water. And with that device, the average household can save 200 to 500 liters of water per month. That's my core. So my basic innovation is that particular filter I'm using. The basic bottom line deliverable is we're going to save a large amounts of water, which translates to savings of money, and for the household as well as for society. That probably won't change very much. If it does, then your product has now changed. Now, the communication that goes on around that will evolve depending on the particular group you're targeting. Are they investors? Are they partners? Is it people in Africa versus people in developed countries or more developed countries? It's not black or white. That will change, but that core will probably stay the same, and everyone needs to be aligned on that.
I see. Yes, and so with this core, how do you distill the scientific advancement without making it too technical?
Exactly. I would come back to that example of triaging, that metaphor that I tried to say. You've got to figure out. So for instance, if we go to the example of that system with a quartz filter that recycles sink water.
Yeah.
When I pitch my idea, there are other people who also are looking to, recycle wastewater and use it again somehow. So I've got to think about what are the ways that I stand out from them. And let's imagine it's this quartz filter. Okay, then that's where I'll go. And that's it. I'll just talk about that filter. And I'll talk about why that filter puts my product either ahead or at least complementary to whatever the competition is doing. What are the unique value propositions of that quartz filter and what that involves? And that's it. There's probably a lot of other things going on in the science of my product, but I'm probably not going to need to mention them unless it's really the right occasion. That's just one example. I think, especially with people from scientific and technical backgrounds, they can kind of fall in love with the details because that's what they have to manage day in, day out. But I think it's important to remember that almost everyone out there, including other researchers and scientists and engineers, they don't care about 98% of my scientific details. And so you really have to be it's about discipline. It's about understanding what they really need to know and being okay with leaving out the other 98%.
And I guess that changes depending on which stakeholder you're talking to, whether it's an investor, a lawyer, potential new hire, customer. So is it those core values that stay the same, or is it the technical details that vary when you're speaking to these different stakeholders? Yeah,
exactly. That's a nice way of putting it. I would say that what should remain constant is that core. What are you promising people? All right. So now if you're talking to investors, you should be promising them a good return. Yeah. So everything you talk about should bring to bear on that, should illustrate how they're likely to get a good return. If you're talking to potential strategic partners, then maybe you're going to offer to them market share. You're talking to a partner who's got a particular component, and you need to illustrate how you're going to take their component, put it into a device that's going to go into every household, for example. Something that they haven't been able to do before. If you're talking to the end user, then, for example, with the water filter, now you're offering them, savings of 200 to 500 euros.
Yeah.
Okay. So give me 1 second. Let me pause the recording. Some phone was ringing. I didn't know about.
Yeah.
redo that? Uh-huh. Oh,
No,
I'm back. It should
right.
be, you didn't hear it?
No, we can just, you can barely hear it, and we can just.
No, if you can barely hear it, I'm totally fine with that. I really don't, that's fine. I had silenced my phone, but I didn't realize there's some other phone in the room. So great,
No problem.
good, which is now. Good. So what were we talking about?
So we were talking
with the water.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and then so with the end user, you know, you're going to promise that I would suggest that you do speak a little bit to the technical innovation so that you give them a handle, because say in the field of recycling wastewater, everyone's promising savings.
Mm-hmm.
So you definitely want to demonstrate that you can promise that at least better or even better than the competition. But you do want to go into your technical stuff so that they have a handle on what sets you apart. You know, they want the end user will want to know, if you're promising me savings like these other guys, how expensive is it going to be for me? How environmentally friendly is it going to be for me? Right? Is it going to involve a difficult, complex setup? Right? So you are going to also get technical. So the core is the same for all, but the specific details you bring to bear as evidence to support your deliverable, that will change.
I see. Interesting. So have you got any examples of where startups have used sort of this communication strategy to gain some funding, to secure a patent or anything like that?
Yeah, I have. We actually have I think maybe the best example is a very recent one. So we have a client. Our firm has a client. They're in the pharma industry, and they provide economic consulting to pharma companies. And so they, for example, they try to position themselves as an external partner, where when pharma companies need to do economic analyses to enter a market or to justify R&D into a new product. And they came to us because, you know, there are many consultancies that do what they do. And all of those consultancies offer very similar ranges of service and types of services. And so their problem was, how do we stand out in this? You know, we're not promising a fundamentally new service. Sure, they think they do maybe a better job than many, but they easily look like everybody else in the field. So how can they stand out? And after looking at all this, I told them, I recommended to them that I think that the way you're going to stand out is to emphasize the fact that you're small and flexible, and that you really partner very closely from the beginning to the end of the project with those people, with the larger firm, with the client. And in other words, I told them, I think that your unique proposition will not necessarily come out from the types of services you do, because everybody's offering them, but from the way that you do those services. So from the fact that you are really a listening ear, you are working closely with that client all the time. You're an external partner who's almost as good as an in-house person, because you're embedded in what they're doing and you totally identify and follow the processes that client is using. And so they're going to see how that works for them. The jury is out, but I cite that as an example where, you know, their challenge was, how do we communicate what we offer in a way that differentiates us? And the only thing that really jumped out was their particular approach to how they work with clients. And so how do you communicate that? So I've tried to convince them to post videos, to success stories where they emphasize the interactional element, how they work with the client. And so I cite this as an example to many startups. You've got to differentiate yourself. Most startups are working on problems that are well recognized as important, because if they weren't, probably the startup wouldn't be targeting it. And most startups there's a lot about those startups that looks similar to a lot of other companies in that space. And so they've got to really blow up and magnify and highlight and be very specific on what they're doing that is not something everyone else is doing. So it could be unique, totally unique to them, or it could be something that's rare in the space. And that's where you want to spend your time. That's what you're going to triage out as the highest priority.
That core message that you talked about earlier is sort of identifying that and shoving it in front of your audience's face, if you like.
Yeah. Indeed.
So just to close, Chapin, if a founder could do one thing that would immediately improve their communication strategy, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think one suggestion might be to actually designate. We're in the era of chief operating officer, chief financial officer, chief innovation officer. I propose chief storytelling officer. So a CSO, which I think already means something else, but we'll figure out the acronym. But whether that person has a title or not, I do recommend that any company, whether startup and certainly later, that you have someone on board who is working constantly on that communication strategy, on the storytelling strategy that's going to support the company's goals as needed and as things evolve. This could be someone in-house. It could also be a trusted external partner. In the example I mentioned that we do, for example, with clients, where the client partners with us in the long term. And so we also move with them. So of course, our firm can do that. You can always reach out to us, and there are other consultancies that do that. So having someone that you can bounce ideas off, that can be a devil's advocate, that can bring, since they're not so deep into that mission, they can maybe give you that a more objective assessment. Yeah, that would resonate with your target audience, or no, I'm not sure about that. That could give this impression. Someone from the outside, because when you're working within your group, within your team, it's easy to develop that group think and to be in that bubble. You need someone who can give you reality checks. And to give you an example of how that could work, if you have, let's say you decide, okay, our goal is to gain 5% market share in the first year or two. Then if that's your business goal, then your communication strategy could then be, okay, how do we convince people to start using our product? How do we convince them that we can be much more convenient to them and reassuring to them than whatever healthcare pathway they have to use now? And how do we do that across the various channels that our future patients are likely to use? That could be your communication strategy. And then you work with that partner to keep that going. And then as you make breakthroughs and you start to see a demographic develop in your customer groups, then you can start to refine that, differentiate, segment your market, and again, adapt your communication accordingly.
I see. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much for your time, Chapin.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Thank you.